We need to talk about ideas, good ones and bad ones. We need to learn stuff about the world. We need an honest, intelligent, thought-provoking, and entertaining review of what the hell happened on this planet in the last 7 days. We need to sit back and listen to the Iron Fist and the Velvet Glove.
Welcome back, dear listener. This is episode 455 of the Iron Fist and the Velvet Glove podcast. Probably the last episode for 2024. I'm Trevor. Over there is Joe. How are you, Joe?
I'm good.
Joe's good. Unfortunately, no Scott. Scott presented us with a medical certificate in the form of a COVID test that showed...
Which you found on the internet.
Yes. At first, I thought he was telling us he was pregnant.
Well, maybe.
He's got COVID and is not feeling well at all. So,
Remember, anything is possible.
Thoughts and prayers for
Concepts
Scott.
of thoughts and prayers.
Yes. It was a long, long time ago we did that episode that showed that thoughts and prayers were actually detrimental for people in hospital.
For people with heart attacks, I think it was.
Well, what they did was they said to a control group, they said to these people, we've got people praying for you as part of an experiment. And those people thought, shit, I must be really unwell if they've organised a prayer group for me. And that had a detrimental effect on their health just by them thinking that they were worse than they really were because of having a prayer group acting for them. So, knowing that somebody is praying for you can be detrimental to your health. I guess if they're doing it, you're not knowing. Don't tell Scott that you're praying for him. Anyway, convoluted way of saying Scott's not here. In the chat room, John is there. As always, good on you, John. I think he's on the Gold Coast tonight. John, when do I qualify for my beer for the failure of a North Korean troop deployment in Russia? When do I get my beer? That's what I want to know. Anyway, on the agenda for this episode, not doing Tiananmen Square. Sorry, Watley, hadn't had time to research. Sorry to a couple of other people who are keen for that, but to do it justice needs a bit more time. I'm going to kick off, Joe, with just some conversations I've had in the last 24 hours with people. Then we'll talk about Syria, talk about South Korea. It's been 2 weeks since we've done this podcast, so a few things have happened, like the country of Syria.
I've forgotten about that, yes. I remember Syria. But
Yes. John in the chat room says, just after you admit Putin was wrong to invade. The opposition's nuclear plan, if we can call it that.
Yes.
The synagogue attack in Melbourne. A football deal with Papua New Guinea that has...
Very important.
That has Scott Morrison type feel about it in that we've somehow we've spent money ostensibly to help Papua New Guineans, but really just giving it to the NRL to provide a football team. And then we've said to the Papua New Guineans, we're going to take the team off you if you have anything to do with China. Believe it or not. Incredible. And a bunch of other just stuff that's happened. So Don's in the chat room. Hello, Don. So, Joe, I've had a few discussions with different people, Christmas parties and other get-togethers and whatnot, or just things I've seen on social media. And it's getting really difficult to talk to people about events in the world. And, I'm struggling. It's getting tough. I'm finding it, Joe, that I think people are so propagandized about certain things that you can't begin to talk to people about issues almost in the same way that you wouldn't sit down with a heavily religious person and think that you could talk them out of their religion in 10 minutes or something. And it's kind of like that way with a lot of these topics where there's so much inbuilt sort of propaganda that people are relying on that you have to say, hang on a minute, like, okay, I've had 3 conversations and I'll mix them all up, but they're all with really smart people, like really smart people. And one guy was saying that he thought that the Weekend Australian was only just right of centre. Where do you go with that? Like, you clearly haven't read that paper properly.
I definitely haven't. But
If
hey,
you
it's
think that-
Murdoch rag, so I'm going to make an assumption.
Well, it's been a while since I've read actually the Weekend Australian, but I know my readings of it in the past and the snippets I've seen, I know it hasn't changed, and I know it's gone even crazier to the right. But for an educated person to think that that the Weekend Australian is only just right of centre, you can't just negate that in a quick 2-minute discussion. So that's just hard work to even get anywhere. The other thing he said was, he was talking about recommending that I read a book about China wanting to invade Taiwan. The boiling something or other, the name will come to me in a little, The Boiling Moat. He said, really good book. You should read it. Basically, China wants to invade Taiwan. There's only a couple of years and it's going to happen. In the meantime, the West needs to aggressively build up and get more weapons to stop this terrible thing happening. And, excellent book I should read. And then I just looked up the book and what is it? What are the details here? Let me just bring this across. So it's a collection of essays and thoughts by different people. 5 of the US authors served in the Marines, 3 in the Navy, 1 in the Army, and the Australian author has had senior positions in the Australian Department of Defence, Intelligence Community, and Australian National University. The Israeli author is a former IDF brigade commander in combat situations, and the Japanese author, a vice admiral, is a former commander of the JMSDF and advisor to the Japanese National Secretariat.
I'm guessing Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force.
Yeah, that's a good crack at that one, Joe, I reckon. One of the 2 Danish authors is a former Prime Minister and NATO Secretary General. The other Danish author was a Danish diplomat focusing on China and Taiwan. And the Taiwanese author served on Taiwan's National Security Council. Like a bunch of people, Joe, who have been in organisations, mostly military and think tanks, where, of course, you're going to hold a view that more weapons should be manufactured, deployed, money should be spent, and you're going to have a negative view of China. And it's just like you wouldn't pick up that book expecting to get anything else but that story. And I just think that it's like going into McDonald's and thinking you might get a healthy, satisfying, properly balanced meal. You're just going to get fast food shit, which is what you're going to get from that book.
In France, you can get a nice salad. I don't know about over here.
Yeah. What else have I had in my conversations? Same guy said, well, of course, Russia's got North Korean soldiers there and it's to make up for their numbers. And I said, not so fast. That hasn't actually been proven as yet. What else did I have in these conversations in the last few hours? Another friend of mine had a link to Friends of Israel Facebook group. I gather it was because he's a member of it and he was recommending it. And if you're looking at the screen live, that's the picture they use for their group. It's a muscular soldier clutching a kind of Israeli flag, Star of David, and a map of sort of Israel type thing that he's grimacing as he clutches to protect it. And oh my God, just as a matter of principle, he couldn't join an organisation which had that as its cover art, Joe. Could you? Does that just not scream stupid to you?
Well, it just screams Christian nationalism, but for a Jew.
And a bit of homoerotica in there as well.
Oh, probably.
Robin Bristow, are you watching? Is there anything there for you in that picture? I don't know.
Who says he's into big, butch, manly guys? He might be into twinks.
He might be. But it's just like, what are you doing posting a link to that? And other statements from amongst these people. This is yeah. What else did I have in there? I just honestly, it's like people have got a religion and there's so much indoctrination and propaganda in people that you can't begin to deal with these issues without dealing with that. And I just don't have the time, or I do want to maintain a few friendships, some real ones. So I'm
recommended a book called Dying of Whiteness.
Right.
Which is somebody who I think went through Appalachia and was interviewing these people.
What's Appalachia again?
The Appalachian Mountains.
Oh, okay, right.
They're very rural.
I thought this was a condition. Sorry.
No.
Okay. Yeah.
Talking to them about politics, and it was the if they vote for anything left wing, that's betraying who they are, and that they will vote for people who are bad for them, because otherwise it would mean betraying their whiteness.
Right.
It was so much part of their cultural identity that they couldn't possibly think of voting Democrat.
Yeah. So anyway, I was kind of and then another friend who is on a particular meat diet, like carnivore type diet. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons why, or one of the, he's sort of explaining it, and one of the positives for this idea was that Jordan Peterson's daughter was promoting it, and that was seen as a good thing.
Yes, she's been on his podcast, I believe.
Yeah,
or even ran his podcast whilst he was in getting drug treatment.
Yeah, I mean, she's as big a shyster as he is in terms of selling consultancy and videos to do with the diet.
I did see a spoof headline saying that Trudeau was going to campaign on the fact that he's managed to get, what was his name?
Peterson?
Yeah, Peterson. To move down to Florida.
Oh, right.
So I don't know if he's actually moved to Florida.
Yeah.
Or whether that was just part of the spoof headline.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm starting to self-censor at these things, Joe, where I just can't even begin to start on some of these topics. I'm just going, it's too hard. I won't even go there. So I've been finding it quite depressing. Yeah. What's John say? I've been having this problem with my neighbour for a while. I used to be able to talk to him, but since he declared that he was upset about being wrong all the time, I just listen now to the Sky After Dark talking points. Right. Okay.
Yeah, it looks like he has moved to Florida.
Jordan Peterson.
Yes.
Well, he'd be amongst friends down there.
Well, indeed.
Yeah.
To be honest, I wouldn't want to live in Canada for the climate.
Right. Yeah, well, yeah. So that's my little rant. I'm just finding it increasingly difficult to have conversations with people because I just have to self-censor now. Yeah. Joe, any thoughts on Syria and what happened over there?
You cannot be Sarah.
You cannot be serious. Yeah.
Yep. It looks like it was a proxy war for many countries, and Russia couldn't carry on propping up Assad because they were too mired down in the Ukraine.
Mm.
And
So we've got a bunch of jihadists who are now described as rebels. And
but the ISIS jihadists have also just been bombed by the Americans in the hope that they don't get involved in the coalition.
Right. So as opposed to the other type of jihadists who they're happy to have take over Syria.
The slightly more moderate jihadists. Yes, I think so.
Yes. So, yeah. So Syria's new leader, well, let me just try and, if I can get through the liberators of Syria being celebrated by the West are Islamist groups.
HTS, I believe, is the abbreviation. I can't remember what it stands for.
The leader of which has a $10 million bounty on his head as a specially designated global terrorist.
Yes.
Because he founded the Syrian branch of Al-Qaeda. And the West is saying, isn't it great that Assad's gone? And are papering over the fact that it's Al-Qaeda taking over.
I was going to say, I'm thinking possibly Afghanistan is better than Syria was.
Afghanistan now
is
better than Syria under Assad.
Life in Afghanistan now is better than life under Assad. Is possible.
I don't know.
I mean, I can't think they were great either way, but...
Yeah. But, you know, Assad had lost control of the country in the sense that large parts of it were already occupied by enemy forces.
Yeah.
Namely, the Americans had control of the oil fields, so he had no money in order to run a government.
Yeah, apparently there was rampant inflation.
Yeah. So crippled economically because lost control of the oil.
Mm.
Yeah. And then we had Turkey.
He seems to have not done badly financially.
One assumes he's taken some
out
money.
Several billion, I think.
Who knows?
And had a very lucrative drug trade.
Yeah, who knows? But it's just an extraordinary situation where the Americans are supposedly in Syria. One of the reasons
was to keep the Islamists out.
Islamists, and then a bunch of Islamists take over and they're quite happy with that. And at the same time, the Turks are fighting the Kurds in Syria. But the Kurds are kind of friends of the Americans. It's a lot of competing interests. It looks like the country will just be broken up into little fiefdoms for different... Oh, and of course, Israel.
Israel has said they're going to double the expansion in the Golan Heights.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, very quickly, in a matter of days, the various groups that were just picking at the carcass of the Syrian country have grabbed bits that they can get and are just proceeding as they go. And good luck to the people of Syria for how that ends up. It looks like it could be quite ugly. So, I'll read a little bit from Arnaud Bertrand on this one. No, actually, I'll read Yanis Varoufakis. He said, "The Western media's duplicity has broken all records. When jihadists entered Kabul, ousting the US regime, it was the end of the world. Now that jihadists have entered Damascus to overthrow a secular enemy of the West, It's a triumph of the human spirit. Because you've got people like The Guardian with the headline, Syrians celebrate fall of Bashar al-Assad after 5 decades of dynastic rule. Like, at least these organisations could just say, it's a shit show still. A crazy maniacal despot has been replaced by a crazy maniacal jihadist group, and let's all just throw up our hands and fear for the poor Syrians, rather than, isn't it great, and all these people being freed, and let's smile about it?
Probably. I mean, I saw some claims that he used to be an Islamist, but he isn't anymore.
Yes, but the guy had a $10 million bounty on his head as a terrorist. It's like,
but if someone said Majid Nawaz was now going to be the ruler of some state, would you go, oh, well, he used to be a crazy Islamist, therefore we should be afraid?
If Osama bin Laden was alive and said, you know what, I've had second thoughts. I'm a moderate, inclusive sort of guy now. Let me take over Syria. And America says, okay. Like, that's almost...
No, it wasn't let me. He did anyway.
Well,
I don't know how involved America was, because it was mostly the Russians not propping up Assad.
Yes. But that's the closer analogy, Joe.
Well,
as if Osama bin Laden turned around and said, oh, actually, I'm one of the good guys now. And the West said, oh, well, he says he's a good guy, and instead of wearing a camouflage outfit, he wears a suit now. So, it must be legit. We'll give him a go. Can't be worse than Assad.
Well, you'd have to go a long way to be worse than Assad.
Yeah, not even Osama bin Laden could be worse than Assad. It's where we're at. John says, sadly, Syria will probably trade one dictatorship for another. Alison, evening all. Hello, Alison. Yeah.
And Alison's mother.
Oh, and Alison's mother, if she still listens there as well. Good point, Joe. Arnaud Bertrand says, the liberators of Syria being celebrated by the West are Islamist groups on their own official terrorist lists. And the leader, a $10 million bounty on his head as a specially designated global terrorist for founding the Syrian branch of Al-Qaeda. That's a pretty impressive CV. Biden called this a historic opportunity for the long-suffering people of Syria to build a better future, while his administration continues to occupy a third of Syria, controlling its oil fields and maintaining crippling sanctions and bomb its territory. Russia, despite being in an alliance with Syria, shrugged it all and let their ally fall. Syria's new leaders remain bizarrely silent about Israel invading their territory and the US bombing and occupying their country. It's true, the new jihadist leaders haven't said to Israel and America, get out of here. And the entire strategic assets, the Navy and Air Force, were destroyed by the US and Israel in air raids. The US maintains its occupation of a third of Syria, including most of the oil fields, claiming it's necessary to ensure the enduring defeat of ISIS. Hamas, while in the middle of a war with Israel, took time to congratulate the Syrian rebels, even though Assad was their longtime ally. That was weird, Joe. Why would Hamas congratulate the rebels?
Because they're hoping to get something out of it, aren't they?
Good point. Because Iran has been able to funnel supplies to Hamas via Syria, and maybe Hamas is hoping that the jihadists will allow that to continue. So,
Russia has been friendly to the new winners because they're hoping to keep their military bases there.
Okay. The US celebrates the liberation of Syrian prisoners while operating its own concentration camps in the country. Turkey is fighting against the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces with apparent US approval, while the Syrian Democratic Forces were fighting Assad, which the US wanted, meaning US-backed forces are effectively fighting other US-backed forces. It's a crazy mixed-up world in there in Syria. And
I thought we preferred the Kurds because Turkey is going very right-wing Islamist. And the Kurds were fighting Al-Qaeda and ISIS way back when.
well, we liked the Kurds because they were fighting the jihadists, I thought. That was the main reason why we liked them.
The Kurds were in Iraq as well, weren't they?
Yeah.
Because Saddam had a go at gassing them.
I think they were part of the unfortunate carve-up
Oh,
of
absolutely.
the Sykes-Picot was just to run these borders through the middle of Kurdish territory, leaving small
Yeah,
bits of
so
Kurds
Some are in
outnumbered.
Turkey, some are in Syria, and some are in Iraq.
Mm.
And they want their own independent homeland.
Yeah. Iran, they also abandoned their strategic ally. So
Yeah.
he says, the simplest explanation might go something like this. The US welcomes the fall of a long-time opponent. Neighbouring powers like Israel and Turkey see an opportunity for territorial gain. Rebel leaders seem willing to accept loss of sovereignty and territory in exchange for domestic control over a diminished Syria. Russia and Iran chose to cut their losses given other regional priorities, and smaller players like Hamas are scrambling to adapt. That's probably a pretty fair summary of Turkey.
And I thought Hezbollah were also involved.
I think they...
So I think Hezbollah were
Right.
friends with Assad,
Yes.
and Israel has bombed the shit out of Hezbollah, which meant they couldn't spare the fighters
Yes.
to help prop up Assad.
Yeah.
Because the story of Assad's collapse is literally, and this was fairly cherry-picked information, but was, a Land Cruiser turning up with a 50 cal on the back and tanks running away. Yeah, basically the Syrian army were just so, the morale was so broken that the second the rebels turned up, they just turned tail and fled.
Mm.
So there wasn't even serious fighting.
Yeah. Apparently they were very poorly funded. The armed forces were on some crazy thing like US $7 a month or something. There was just no money to pay them. As a consequence, they had to resort to corruption in order to feed themselves. And, all comes back to sanctions and financial crippling meant that Assad couldn't maintain a military and control of it. So,
Well, he could. He just didn't want to give up his billions to fund his military.
right, yep. John in the chat room, news, sport, blank, 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 religion. Bring back the blank, blank,
sex.
blank. Oh, sex. Next week, less depressing. Yeah. Right. That's Syria, I think. Meanwhile, Joe, South Korea,
Yeah.
while we were sleeping,
Had a coup.
yeah, is it the president or prime minister, whatever he's called,
President, I think.
tried to say we need a martial law situation because of an emergency, because those North Koreans are up to no good, and we need to sort of shut the parliament down and give me special powers, and then the parliament members managed to scramble over fences, physically get into parliament and hold a vote to sort of overcome that.
The Constitution says that if the president declares martial law, the parliament can vote against it. And the special forces were surrounding parliament to try and keep the parliamentarians out. But they managed to get in and had enough of a quorum to pass a resolution that basically said no, martial law wasn't in place.
Not a good look for a country.
No. And from my understanding, it's because he had lost control of the parliament. He was sitting over an opposition-controlled parliament, and they wouldn't pass any of the laws that he wanted, which is why he wanted to pass martial law.
Yes. I believe he was very sort of pro-American.
Right.
I believe.
I know that he's right-leaning was what I was hearing.
I also believe that under the current laws, South Korea can't sell arms to Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
But, gee, Joe, imagine you wanted to sell arms to Ukraine and you needed to change the public mood in order to get a groundswell of support to change the law so that you could sell arms to Ukraine. What would be one story you might pitch that might help your cause and might get South Koreans to want to supply arms to the Ukraine?
You're suggesting that the North Koreans in Russia /
Story.
Ukraine is merely a ploy to be able to change the law?
It could be. I'm not saying it is. Who knows? But if
I
you're
would have
kind of
thought-
wondering, why the hell would South Korea make up stories about North Korea being in Russia?
Well, maybe because it's true.
Maybe because it's true, but also maybe because people there want to sell arms and this
You'd
would be
think that the North Koreans supplying weapons to Russia would be enough.
well, why not add a few troops to the story?
Well,
So
I mean, don't forget, a lot of these proxy wars are very much, let's see how our armaments do against their armaments.
yes,
And Vietnam was very much Russia and the US testing out their weapon systems.
yeah.
So
John, in
if,
John in the chat room says long bow, Trev.
uh-huh.
Well, we know why the Ukraine would say it, because they want more Western help. So
Yeah.
if they're gathering in more enemies, they're likely to get more allies. And now we know why South Korea might do it. I'm not saying they did, but stranger things have happened. An example being the president declaring martial law and trying to, effectively cancel Parliament. So that would be a stranger story, John, than the one I've just outlined.
It definitely is a very strange story.
Yeah. And then, Joe, it took them a week to impeach the guy. Like they ummed and ahed, and his own party basically were supporting him and refusing to impeach him for a while. So you're stroking shouldn't it be a white cat, Joe, that you're stroking?
I don't have a white cat.
Yeah, but with your baldy head and yeah.
He suddenly wanted attention.
Yeah, fair enough. Said enough shit talk from Trevor about possible North Korean
Soldiers
reasons.
in the Ukraine, yes.
Yeah. So yeah, think about that one when it comes to South Korea, North Korea, and troops. Feedback from a patron, Mark. He said he's just finished the Putin book. He said, very interesting, but was disappointed with the obvious bias. This was the one I recommended. He says that the author spent a fair amount of coverage regarding the Russiagate scandal, but from my understanding, this has been completely debunked. Also, he covered the atrocities done by Russian forces, but not a single word regarding the same of Ukrainian forces. Poor form, in my opinion. And he says, Trevor, have you seen the Joe Rogan interview with Mike Benz? Amazing detail regarding the black ops of the CIA, State Department, etc. Worth a look. And Scott should watch it too. That was from Mark. So,
Problem with Joe Rogan is he just allows conspiracy theorists on to spout bullshit.
yeah.
So unfortunately, I don't know that anybody he has on I can necessarily trust.
Yes. Yep. You'd have to look at the credentials of whoever Mike Benz is. So, but Who knows? I mean, he does occasionally get some good people. Well,
He used to get a lot of good, but it was always hit and miss, and it seems to be more miss than hit these days, which is why I gave up on him.
Joe, we need to talk about Peter Dutton and the opposition's nuclear plan. Somewhere I saw a tweet that said, if God had wanted us to have renewable energy, he would have put a giant thermonuclear furnace in the sky.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Dutton came
the costings are a joke.
But it's from their consultants, Frontier Economics, Joe.
They're consultants who were given a brief, weren't they? Like to see what the brief was.
I had a look at Frontier Economics a couple of weeks ago for some other reason. I came across. And just, a small little consultancy group that claims to be experts in the energy field, because I think one of the directors used to work for one of the energy companies of some sort. And some just literally a 2-bit organisation operating, who knows, could easily be from a shed or their mother's basement.
Or maybe a shack on, what was it, Kangaroo Island?
Yes. Knocking together a few spreadsheets and dismissing the CSIRO's calculations.
So what would you like us to write in this report that we're writing for you?
And one of the things was that one of the reasons why their costs were lower was they just assumed that we would need less energy than what the energy experts have said we'll need. So
and then assuming that they didn't need to build transmission lines.
Yes.
But people have said even if they're building it at the existing coal power plants, you still need to have the coal power plants running whilst you build the nuclear, and therefore you're going to have to run dual power lines anyway.
Yep. But, Joe, I know that I could be talking to the boomers that I regularly come across, and I know that they will say, oh, well, opposition's come out and experts are saying that nuclear is actually the cheaper option. And, okay, the other guys say that it's not, but, this is all up for grabs now. It's not really, one side says this, one side says that. Who really knows where the truth lies?
But whenever you find a fact that you disagree with, you find an expert to find a convenient alternative fact.
Yes.
And now the water is muddied and you can pick and choose whichever one is convenient to you.
I know. That's the world we live in today, Joe. Yeah. It's incredibly frustrating that the credentials of these people are not weighed up.
No.
2-bit Frontier Economics on the one hand, and not only CSIRO, but a whole bunch of other international groups have been looking at these costings, and all of the other guys are more or less on the same page when it comes to these costings. And just this shitty Peter Dutton opposition comes out and says, oh, well, here are our figures a week before Christmas on a half page, scribbled on the back of an envelope with a thumbnail dipped in tar. And this is the same group who voted against The Voice for the reason of not enough detail, providing such a shitty piece of policy.
Well, and it's quite transparent that there are only 2 reasons for this nuclear. One is to wedge the Labour Party on, despite it not actually being viable.
Is there any there's no wedging can happen here for the Labour Party?
Well,
there's no wedge.
It's just, we've got a policy that's better than their policy. Our policy is to stick our head in the sand and carry on burning coal for the next 50 years.
Yeah, I don't see the wedge on this one. There isn't.
Well,
there isn't a competing group against another competing group.
Okay, but I mean, it's very much, hey, you've got a shitty energy policy and ours is brilliant.
Yes. In the chat room, Julia's got a link to Let's Hope the Gen Z and Millennials Will Save Us. This is an ABC article, the title of which is election 2025, Gen Z millennial outnumber baby boomers. So, yeah, we'll see what happens with that. I just need to get my chat up here so I can scroll through it.
Yeah,
So
I
I can
haven't
go
missed
through-
much.
I haven't missed much. Let me just go back. Oh, Don, why can't we just replace wars with tickle fights? You're right, Joe. Oh, no, good on you, Don. That's a good one. It's better than the longbow Trev from John, anyway. Yeah. John says maybe the wedge is the Libs have a plan and the left don't. Yeah.
Well, the left do. The left have renewables.
Yes.
I've seen that the Burdekin pumped hydro plan, isn't it? The Burdekin,
Yes.
they're offering the land back to the original vendors.
Because the
but-
new Queensland state government has canned it.
Yes, but one of the original landowners has said, look, 90% of the hydrological work has been done. Basically, if Labor get back into power, I can't see that this isn't going to be restarted.
Really?
So so why would I buy the land back?
Haven't heard that. Where'd you see that?
I think an ABC article.
Right. Do you know, I get very little from ABC online news anymore. I just
Okay.
find it so lame, the stories that are there. They infuriate me. Even and the Guardian as well. So,
Could have been the Courier Fail. Sometimes I get free articles
right.
through Apple News.
Anyway, that's an interesting one because I...
So, yeah, a number of people were buying the land back or saying that they were going to if the price was right.
Yes.
But a number of other people have said there's too many question marks about Labor coming back in and restarting it all.
Yep. Okay. That was the Dutton nuclear plan. Calling it a plan is
Yes.
disinformation in itself. You know, the incredible part of it, of course, Joe, is that it just relies on the government to do everything. This is, you know, the Liberals and National are supposed to be the party of free enterprise. And
Well, talking about the small government, have you seen the fact that Christopher Lee has banned any talk of abortion for the next 4 years?
yes.
Which, you know, sure, it kicks the can down the road, but people are saying if he goes to the next election going, well, of course, we managed to not, I kept my promise. We didn't repeal abortion.
Yes.
But people are saying, well, that's just a sign that the crazies are in Parliament and will be chomping at the bit at the next election to get their chance.
Yeah. So he quickly passed a motion through the Parliament to the effect of this Parliament will not talk about abortion laws.
Yeah.
And that stopped the Qatar group from bringing forward a motion. So,
Yes.
so yeah, extraordinary.
Yeah. For the party of small government.
Yes. And democracy. Isn't it marvellous, this democracy that we've got going here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Synagogue attack, Joe. So in Melbourne, there was a firebombing.
There was okay. It was actually a bombing. I know there was a fire.
Well, a fire. I've just got a headline here: firebombing of Melbourne synagogue.
Right.
But, yeah. So
I don't know.
anyway, it was some sort of incendiary type operation. Well, I, of course, dear listener, on your behalf, read the Courier Mail. I'm not going to add the Australian to it unless 5 more patrons come on board because the cost of that will just annoy me too much. But the outrage in the Murdoch press over Albanese's failure to condemn the attack as a terrorist attack and to demand a special task force be formed to combat anti-Semitism, and basically saying extremely poor form by Albanese, even though as soon as the event happened, he said, well, that's not good. We don't want that happening. Of course, I stand with all Australians in deploring what's just happened, but because he didn't declare it as a anti-Semitic terrorist attack quickly enough, they were just going for him in the Murdoch papers, painting him out to be weak on terrorism, weak on anti-Semitism, a failure for Australia, and should be booted out as quickly as possible.
Well, if Dutton gets in power, he's going to have armed guards at every synagogue.
Yeah. You honestly can't overstate the vitriol that was directed at Albanese. So there's never any point in pandering to the Murdoch press on any issue, because eventually at some point they will find the slightest in their mind failure and beat it up out of all proportion. Now, I think Albanese is actually, very pro-Israel, and is, unfortunately, it's not because he's scared of Murdoch that he's been making the bad decisions he's been making. But in any event, they turn on you quick whenever they get the slightest opportunity. So, yeah, that was what was going on in the Murdoch press. Joe, it was an Orthodox synagogue, and Orthodox Jews are usually anti-Zionist. So whoever firebombed the synagogue, if they were doing it as a protest against Israel's actions in Gaza, they probably got the wrong synagogue, because that's probably a synagogue that's against the Zionist movement as an Orthodox synagogue.
I did just hear about an attack in the US on some, I can't remember what the name was. Anyway, it was something that sounded Jewish, but actually it was an anti-Semitic hate group that was attacked because these people thought it was Jewish.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
They read the sign too quickly and thought, is that right? Oh, God. Hey, before I forget, when you said attack in the US, the other one was the attack on the CEO of the medical
United
insurance
Healthcare
company.
Yes.
So, dear listener, there was footage, CCTV footage of the attacker shooting the CEO of a medical insurance company, and he was on the run for a few days. And basically one of the things to come out of this was memes and comments and stuff on the internet of people supporting the attacker because they saw it as a fight against outlandish...
Well, there were memes like lead poisoning is a pre-existing condition.
Yes.
And my thoughts and prayers are out of network or not in my plan.
Right. Yep. Yep.
Because this particular insurance company was known for denying 30% of all health claims.
Yes. They were probably the worst of the large insurers in terms of terrible customer service. But quite just an interesting social phenomena, Joe, of a CEO being assassinated and a public response that was kind of sympathetic to the assassin.
And so I saw somebody on LinkedIn posting, why are we celebrating this murderer? Our thoughts should be with this hero of he rose from nothing. He had a working class background and he was the lead CEO of this company and he turned the fortunes of this company around. And people were going, you can be against the murder whilst recognizing that this man was a piece of shit who is probably responsible for 20 or 30,000 people dying through lack of healthcare. And I saw another article that said, the fact that the news is being forced to try and make this man not a monster is a recognition of, we should be changing the conversation to this man was killed. Yes, that's a shame, but he has blood on his hands. And maybe we should have some sympathy for his victims.
It will be interesting to see if this is an ongoing trend of who knows.
When the gap becomes large enough between the rich and poor, the guillotines come out. And I was wondering how long it would take. And maybe this is the first sign of it.
Yeah. Could be a very interesting moment historically for that sort of thing. So yeah, back to the synagogue. There's actually an interesting article by our friend Oscar Grenfell from the Socialist Equality Party. I subscribe to their newsletter or whatever it is. I think they're part of my RSS feed. So, and what did he say? Let me just... because the other thing, when that firebombing occurred, Netanyahu was commenting about it. So a firebombing of a synagogue in Australia, and you would have thought Benjamin Netanyahu was enough on his plate without the need to comment. But
I think a firebombing of a synagogue anywhere is going to get the attention of a Israeli Prime Minister.
He said, "I expect the state authorities to use their full weight to prevent such anti-Semitic acts in the future." And then the Israeli leader proceeded to say, "Unfortunately, it is impossible to separate this reprehensible act from the extreme anti-Israeli position of the Labor government in Australia," Netanyahu declared. Among Labor's attacks on Israel, he cited, this is Netanyahu cited, Labor's scandalous decision to support the UN resolution calling on Israel to bring an end to its unlawful presence in the occupied Palestinian territory as rapidly as possible. So that was one of the...
shocking anti-Semitism.
Yes. So that was Netanyahu having a go at Australia. And as Oscar says, Netanyahu's tirade has largely set the terms of the official discussion in Australia, with the Liberal National Coalition taking up his position. So yes, Dutton fully agreed with what Netanyahu was saying. Not a single Labor minister has criticised the fascist Israeli leader's statement. That's Oscar's words there. But yeah, like Joe, some Labor ministers or a Prime Minister with a bit of guts sort of just stood up and said, fuck off.
Said Bibi's been smoking something.
Yes, and ridiculed and lambasted him. But no, softly, softly.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Dutton has denounced Labor as soft on anti-Semitism. And at a press conference, Dutton announced that a coalition government would establish an anti-Semitism task force, bringing together the Australian Federal Police, the domestic political spy agency ASIO, and other state agencies. And basically Albanese called the act eventually an act of terrorism and took up Dutton's demand for an anti-Semitism task force.
I don't know. Is it an act of terrorism? Is it just something else?
Yeah.
I'd like to see some, intelligence saying that it was actually a terrorist act. I mean, it probably is.
Yep.
People hate Jews. That's a sad thing. But yeah, it might have been, I don't know, that the rabbi had gambling debts that needed to be paid off. It could be something totally unrelated to the fact that they were Jewish.
So they've kind of preempted what a investigation should find.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, by declaring it a terrorist act without knowing what's going on.
Who or why, yeah.
True. Yeah. In a rare breach of the official campaign, ABC commentator Laura Tingle noted the very different treatment by our politicians of Muslim communities subject to very similar attacks over the past 10 years. A 2021 study of 75 mosques across Australia by Charles Sturt University found that over half of participating mosques or worshippers at them had experienced targeted violence between 2014 and 2019. In January, a homemade bomb was placed in a car outside a home in Sydney that flew the Palestinian flag. David Wise, a Zionist, was later charged and convicted. So basically, there's been a number of attacks on Muslim community infrastructure and nowhere near the same reaction demanded. Double standards, hypocrisy.
It's because we're a Judeo-Christian nation, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And you tell people that the phrase Judeo-Christian only came up in the Howard years. Didn't exist before that.
Yeah, it's relatively recent.
Yeah.
Because the Christians hated the Jews for so long because the Jews murdered Christ.
Yes. And Papua New Guinea football deal. So a $600 million deal where the Australian government's providing money so that Papua New Guinea can have an NRL team. But the deal has a catch. So it comes with a China escape clause that allows Australia to terminate the deal without giving a reason until 2035. Basically, if the PNG government gets too close to the Chinese government in terms of deals that we don't like. Joe, I find this extraordinary that we would provide money for a football team. Don't worry about hospitals, education, housing, food, clothing, football.
Footy is important. Footy's like religion. It takes the poor people's mind off them being poor.
An opiate for the masses?
Yeah.
Yeah. David Shoebridge, Greens senator, who I quite like, says, I'm in Port Moresby right now. And it's true. People love NRL. They really love it. But no one has told me they want $600 million spent on rugby league. They've been telling me about how hard it is to get a job, see a doctor, and get an education. Best summary I got was waste. This honestly looks like something ScoMo would have cooked up. And it was Albanese and Labor. My God. This has been a hard year, dear listener. This has been a tough year. A Labor government that has been so disappointing.
And now we've got an LNP government in Queensland.
LNP government in Queensland.
And very, very soon we'll have a Trump government in the US.
Yes. We've got the Europeans just rolling over to give the Americans whatever they want. And the place is a mess. It's so difficult. You can't even talk to your friends about these issues because they're so full of propaganda that you just can't even get to the starting gate without shifting the world beneath them. It's tough. Joe Biden, I think we mentioned, yes we did, that he pardoned his son because Scott was surprised by that.
He's now pardoned a whole bunch of other people.
Yeah. One of the people who had their sentence commuted by Biden today was the Kids for Cash judges. So these are the judges. So here it is. former Luzerne County Judge Michael T. Conahan, who gained notoriety for wrongfully imprisoning juveniles in the Kids for Cash scandal, is one of nearly 1,500 inmates whose sentences President Joe Biden commuted Thursday. Conahan, 72, was convicted along with former Judge Mark A. Ciavarella of funneling juvenile defendants into two private for-profit detention centres in exchange for $2.1 million in kickbacks. Judges who wrongfully sent kids to jail in order to get kickbacks from a private prison had their sentences commuted by Joe Biden.
So the right-wing media were going, well, you see, it's all because they're all grifters and he's a grifter and he empathises with them.
Mm.
The left wing have been saying these people have made true grounds in their rehabilitation and they're reintegrating into society. They are sorry for what they did.
Yes.
And that really keeping them in prison anymore is not serving any purpose.
Yes.
And John's comment was about the Bali 9.
Mm. I think they have spent more than enough time in jail for drug offences, and happy to see them come back. And
I was interested to see them saying effectively there is no treaty that allows for them, there is no law that allows for them to carry on serving the rest of their sentence in Australia. And therefore, if they come back to Australia, they'll come back as free men.
that's my understanding, yes.
And the Indonesian government have accepted that, but I understand that the Indonesian populace were very unhappy with Schapelle Corby
Yes.
being released early, and they felt that she had basically flouted their drug laws and then stuck two fingers up at them
Right.
because she was filmed after being released drinking a beer.
Right. Yep.
And it was just, yeah, it was very much, you come over here, you break our laws and expect to be treated in a Western way. So I don't know how well that will do for our relationship with Indonesia.
Yeah, I don't know. But I just think the punishment far outweighs the crime. So good luck to them to get out of there. That's what I can say.
I mean, they it's not like they were innocent people. They were involved in smuggling drugs.
Yep.
They're lucky not to have received the death penalty.
Yep.
And you can only hope they keep their noses clean and don't embarrass us in front of Indonesia.
Yeah. What have we had in the chat room? Julia said the LNP is government by ALP proxy. It is. Or maybe Murdoch proxy even, Julia. So yeah, Murdoch's in government by ALP proxy, almost. John says Albo's just deflecting. Alison says, I can't imagine what it's like to need prior approval for treatments from health insurance companies.
Yeah, I'm in some chronic healthcare forums.
Yeah.
And 90% of the posts are American just complaining about their insurance.
So, yeah. So, good comments in the chat room. I reckon about done, Joe. It's been tough. This has been a tough... I have found Gaza in particular to be really gutting. Just
I heard an interesting interview with Tim Minchin.
Oh, yeah?
Krishnan Guru Murthy, who's a Channel 4 reporter in the UK, has a podcast, and he had Tim Minchin on last week, I think. And Tim Minchin saying basically he's got off social media because he says, yes, he agrees these things are horrible, but he doesn't need them stuck in his face. There's not a lot he can do himself. and he feels that he's unable to look after his kids properly with the depressing news.
Mm.
And sometimes you have to step away and just concentrate on the things that are in your purview, the things that you do have control over.
If you have a mindset, I wouldn't say a mental condition, but a mindset or maybe a propensity for depression or something like that, I can get that it is totally dangerous to sort of keep watching that stuff. I don't think I do have that risk. And I just feel like I owe it somehow to not ignore what's going on. While it's not going to send me crazy, I don't think. If it's just going to make me, well, when I say depressed, not clinically depressed, but just shitty at times. Yes, yeah. And just a real wake-up call of who would have thought that a genocide could be just conducted and documented and essentially it can happen. And as far as the mainstream press is concerned, it's not even happening. And if it is, it's then twisted as to being something that it's not. As a demonstration of the current level of Western propaganda, it's frightening what's been achieved and makes me question whether we can ever agree on anything when I can't even talk to friends and agree on these issues. I think, well, what can we ever agree on anything? We'll never agree on things if we can't agree this is a genocide that has to stop.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the editing of world news I discovered a long time ago, just listening to French media, because the world news I was hearing on the French media was very different from the world news I was hearing on the BBC.
Right.
Just completely, conflicts in parts of the world I'd not heard of, or at least if I had heard of, they certainly weren't on the news that I was listening to.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well. So what's there to say? We'll be back next year. I need a break for a few weeks. Yes. Well, that is something. I actually do need a break from that and just watching that. So, yeah, come back a bit refreshed. Kind of somehow thinking need to start writing some stuff down at some point. But, yeah, not sure what the new year will bring. You'll be around, Joe. You're not going anywhere.
I'm very round.
Yes. So you'll be there stroking your black cat.
Mm-hmm.
A little finger in the air.
Yeah.
Thanks to everybody who's been listening, especially those who are supporters. Much appreciated. Keep it going. I mean, the fact that there's no podcast last week and none next week means I'll be running at a loss for sure in terms of all of the subscriptions. But anyway, overall, the things get paid for, so that's okay. Yeah. We'll be back next week. Not next week, next year. Keep an eye on Facebook for notification about when that is, if you're looking to be on the chat. You know, Joe, I'm almost tossing up next year just going something like Rumble so that I can really let loose. I feel myself censoring because I'm worried about YouTube and Facebook pulling the pin on what we do.
But hang on, if this is going to be about Palestine, do you honestly think Rumble are going to let you go uncensored?
I don't know, won't they? Isn't it the free speech?
Well, yes, but it's only right-wing free speech.
Right, okay.
And Palestine is left-wing free speech.
Yeah. Anyway, I have felt I've had to hold back a bit. So, all right. We'll be back next year. We'll see what happens. Talk to you then. Bye for now.
And it's